dark alleys, remote highways, quiet museum halls. For decades, the FBI has pursued the shadows, chasing killers, thieves, and mysteries that refuse to die. Some cases are solved, others fade into silence, but a rare few remain unsolved. Cases so disturbing, so puzzling, that they haunt investigators to this very day. Those are the cold cases the FBI needs solved. Stories where every clue is a dead end, every suspect slips through the cracks, and every question only breeds more questions. From serial killers who vanished without a trace, to unidentified victims whose lives were stolen and erased, to a heist that stripped the world of priceless masterpieces. These mysteries stretch across decades, taunting law enforcement and daring us to uncover the truth. And tonight, we bring them into the light. Welcome to Breakdown, Cold Cases the FBI Needs Solved. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe because the deeper we go, the darker it gets. Now let's begin. Time can blur memories, it can erase faces, but it never erases the truth. Somewhere hidden in the shadows of Virginia's quiet backroads, a killer, or killers, are still waiting. The Colonial Parkway is a winding, scenic stretch of road that hugs the James River, connecting the historic towns of Jamestown, Williamsburg, and Yorktown. Tourists come here for the views, for the colonial history, for the romance of a drive along the water. But for law enforcement, the Parkway is not remembered for its beauty. It is remembered for blood. Between 1986 and 1989, four young couples were murdered along this picturesque route. 8 victims in total, all killed, their lives stolen in moments of terror that still leave investigators haunted to this day. And despite the FBI's involvement, despite decades of theories, suspects, and dead ends, the Colonial Parkway murders remain unsolved. It began on October 12, 1986. Kathy Thomas, 27 years old, was a U.S. Naval Academy graduate. Bright, ambitious, disciplined, she was in love with a woman named Rebecca Dowski, 31, a college student at the College of William and Mary. The two had driven out to the Parkway that night. For them, it was supposed to be peaceful, a place to talk, to be together without judgment. But they never made it home. The next day, a jogger spotted something strange along the embankment. A white Honda Civic, its nose pointed down toward the York River. Inside, the lifeless bodies of Kathy and Rebecca. Both women had been strangled, their throats slashed with such force that investigators said it was personal. Gasoline had been poured across the car, an attempt to set it ablaze. But for some reason, the killer never lit the match. The FBI descended quickly. Was it a hate crime, a random attack, or something far more calculated? At first, investigators thought it was isolated. But 1 year later, it happened again. September 1987, David Nobling, 20 years old, and Robin Edwards, only 14, were last seen near a drive-in theater. 2 days later, their bodies were discovered along the banks of the James River. Both had been shot execution style. The FBI now realized this wasn't random. Someone was stalking young couples. Someone who knew the secluded pull-offs and hidden trails of the Parkway, and this someone was careful, very careful. In April 1988, another pair vanished. Cassandra Haley, 18, and Richard Call, 20, disappeared after leaving a college party. Their car was found abandoned near the Parkway, the doors unlocked, the keys still inside. Their bodies have never been found. Then, in September 1989, the nightmare repeated. Anna Maria Phelps, 18, and Daniel Lauer, 21, disappeared on a drive to Virginia Beach. Their car was later found neatly parked on the shoulder of the highway. Weeks later, hunters stumbled across skeletal remains deep in the woods. Both had been stabbed to death. By the end of 1989, 4 couples were gone, 8 lives. The Colonial Parkway was no longer just a scenic route, it was a hunting ground. FBI believed they were looking at a serial killer, someone who targeted couples deliberately, someone who knew the area well, perhaps even law enforcement themselves. Why? Because the crime scenes carried strange details. Victims' cars were often left neat, as if staged. Some doors were unlocked, windows down, personal items untouched. It looked like the victims had trusted their killer, or had been forced to comply. One chilling theory, the killer may have been impersonating a police officer. Couples, parked late at night, might have rolled down their windows for someone with a badge, or someone carrying a flashlight, believing it was routine. Another possibility, an insider, Someone who actually was law enforcement or military, who had the knowledge, the control, and the access to commit these crimes and vanish without trace. The FBI threw everything they had at this case. Task forces, deep dives into criminal databases that they examined the wounds, some strangulations, some stabbings, some shootings. It seemed chaotic, inconsistent, but profilers suggested it wasn't. The killer could be experimenting, changing methods to confuse investigators. Hundreds of suspects were interviewed. Names surfaced: disgruntled ex-military, violent offenders in the area, even acquaintances of the victims. But again and again, the FBI hit dead ends. There were rumors of cops, whispers that the Bureau knew more than they admitted, that the killings involved people in positions of authority. Families of the victims still believe there are answers buried in classified FBI files. The Colonial Parkway murders changed the way people in Virginia lived. Parents warned their children. Couples avoided the Parkway at night. The beauty of the Riverside Road was overshadowed by fear. Decades later, DNA technology has advanced. Evidence has been retested, but no definitive suspect has ever been charged. The killer, if still alive, would be an older man now, perhaps living quietly, hidden in plain sight, perhaps still driving down that same road at night, reliving memories of what he left behind. For the families, the pain never left. For investigators, the silence of the Parkway is still deafening. N for the FBI. The Colonial Parkway murders remain one of the most chilling, unsolved strings of killings in American history. For couples, 8 lives, a road that keeps its secrets. Who walked the Parkway that night? Who took their lives? And how much longer will the silence last? There are some crimes so cruel, so unthinkable, that even time refuses to dull their horror. Philadelphia, 1957. A small wooden box sits discarded in the weeds along a quiet roadside in the Fox Chase neighborhood. Inside it is a boy, naked, battered, abandoned. For more than 6 decades, no one would know his name. He became known only as the boy in the box, or, as the public would later call him, America's unknown child. The FBI, Philadelphia police, and countless volunteers have all chased this ghost for years. New technologies, new leads, new theories, but even now, the biggest question lingers: who killed him, and why? It was February 25, 1957. A young man was walking along Susquehanna Road, a quiet stretch in Fox Chase. He had set rabbit traps nearby, but instead of checking them, he stumbled upon something strange: a large cardboard box, the kind used to ship bassins. Inside was the body of a boy, no older than 4 years old. His small frame weighed barely 30 pounds. His hair had been crudely chopped, not by a barber, but roughly, with clumps still clinging to his body. He was bruised, malnourished, covered in scars, some fresh, some old. Someone had killed this child, beaten him, perhaps strangled him, and then left him in a box as if he were nothing. The boy had no clothes, no blanket, no identification, nothing to tell the world who he was. The discovery shocked investigators. But this was only the beginning of a mystery that would spiral into one of the most enduring cold cases in American history. Local police called the FBI immediately. The murder of a child demanded everything they had. Agents photographed the body, fingerprinted him, catalogued every scar. They studied the box. It had once contained a bassinet sold by JCPenney, but the trail ended there. Thousands of identical boxes had been distributed across the East Coast. Posters were printed. The boy's face was drawn in composite sketches, distributed nationwide. Detectives hoped someone would call in, claiming him as their missing child, but no one came forward. No parent, no relative, no guardian. It was as if this boy had never existed. The FBI noted unusual details. The boy had scars from what looked like medical procedures, one on the ankle, another on the groin. He had suffered malnutrition. His hands and feet were scrubbed clean, as if someone had tried to wash away evidence. The haircut appeared forced, likely after death. Why? Was it an attempt to change his appearance, or simply cruelty? The box itself had once held a baby bassinet sold at a local department store. Investigators traced its origins, but the trail led nowhere. They canvassed orphanages, hospitals, schools, nothing. The child was a phantom. Theories that haunted investigators as the years dragged on. Theories piled up. One theory suggested that the boy belonged to a foster home located near the discovery site. Residents of the home were investigated, but no charges were ever filed. Some claimed the boy matched a child who had been living there. Others denied it. The case stalled. In the 1960s, another chilling lead surfaced. A woman in her 20s, known only as M, came forward decades later claiming her abusive mother had purchased, hidden, and killed the boy. She described how he had been forced to live in a basement, beaten, and eventually murdered. But while her account matched some details of the case, inconsistencies and lack of physical evidence made it impossible to prove. Other theories ranged from human trafficking to black market adoption rings, to the boy being an unregistered child from outside the state. And always, in the shadows. The FBI kept the case file open. The boy in the box became more than a case. He became an obsession. Volunteers adopted his memory. Some even paid for his burial plot, where a small gravestone read, "America's Unknown Child." Investigators poured decades of their lives into the case. Retired detectives admitted they were haunted by his face. Unable to stop wondering who he was, the FBI continued testing evidence. Whenever technology advanced from blood typing in the 1960s, to DNA testing in the 1990s, to genetic genealogy in the 2000s, each time they hoped the silence would break. In December 2022, more than 65 years after the discovery, the FBI and Philadelphia police finally revealed a breakthrough. Using advanced DNA genealogy, investigators had traced the boy's relatives, and at last, given him back his name. His name was Joseph Augustus Zarelli. He was 4 years old. Joseph had been born in 1953, in West Philadelphia. His parents were identified, though their names remain partly redacted due to ongoing investigation. His family background was troubled, fractured. Some relatives had long suspected something was hidden in the family's past. But while Joseph's identity was finally restored, the question that haunted everyone remained unanswered. Who killed him? The FBI continues to investigate Joseph's murder. Theories about his parents, extended family, and possible caretakers are still being examined. Genetic genealogy may eventually reveal living suspects, but as of now, no one has been charged. For the public, Joseph is no longer just a nameless victim. He is a child who lived, who laughed, who had a family. But his death remains as mysterious and as cruel as the day his body was found. This case forced the FBI and law enforcement to rethink how unidentified victims are handled. Joseph's story was one of the earliest to highlight the importance of preserving DNA, of never letting go of evidence no matter how cold a case grows. And it is a reminder of something darker, that sometimes the people closest to us, the ones who should protect us, are the very ones who cause the most harm. He lived for 4 short years. He died alone, discarded in a box. For decades he had no name, no voice. But now, we know who he was. What we do not know, what we still need the FBI to answer, is who silenced him, and why. It begins with a phone call. December 2010. A young woman named Shannon Gilbert, a 24-year-old escort from New Jersey, dials 911 in a panic. Her voice is frantic, terrified. She tells the dispatcher that someone is chasing her, that she's in danger. She runs through a quiet, gated community in Oak Beach, Long Island, pounding on doors, begging for help. But before police arrive, she vanishes. Shannon's disappearance should have been just one case, one missing person. But when police began searching the area, they uncovered something no one was prepared for. In the thick marsh grass along Ocean Parkway, near Gilgo Beach, officers found the remains of not one woman, but four young women, wrapped in burlap, discarded like trash. It was a discovery that would open one of the most disturbing mysteries in American history, a mystery that the FBI would call one of the most complex, active investigations of the 21st century. The Long Island serial killer, or simply, Lisk. The women found in 2010 all shared haunting similarities. They were young, petite, and worked as escorts. Advertising services on Craigslist. Melissa Barthélemy, to 24 years old, disappeared in July 2009. Megan Waterman, to 22, vanished in June 2010. Amber Lynn Costello, 27, missing since September 2010. Maureen Brainerd Barnes, -25, disappeared in July 2007. All four had been strangled. All four were carefully wrapped in burlap sacks before being dumped in the brush along Ocean Parkway. This wasn't random. This was deliberate, organized, cold. As search teams scoured the area, more remains surfaced. 10 sets in total. Some were dismembered, some incomplete, a toddler's bones, even the remains of an unidentified man dressed in women's clothing. Ocean Highway had become a dumping ground, a burial site stretching miles. The FBI and Suffolk County Police realized they were facing at least one serial killer, possibly more. The press gave the case a name, the Gilgo Beach murders. Over the years, theories grew wild. Was this the work of one killer, or multiple predators using the same hiding place? Some details suggested a single hand, the burlap, the similar victim profiles, but other remains didn't match the pattern. Could one killer really be responsible for all, or was Gilgo Beach a hunting ground shared by more than one monster? The FBI's profilers began to paint a chilling picture. Lisk, they believed, was a white male, likely in his 30s or 40s when the killings began. Intelligent, organized, familiar with law enforcement methods, someone who could blend into suburban life while hiding a horrific double existence. One of the most haunting details of the case came after Melissa Barthélemy vanished in 2009. For weeks, her younger sister received calls from Melissa's phone. The man on the line taunted her. He described what he had done to Melissa in cold, graphic terms. Police traced the calls. They always pinged off cell towers in Manhattan near Madison Square Garden. The killer was careful. He never stayed on long enough for a trace. But he wanted control. He wanted the family to suffer. The FBI called it a classic hallmark of a sadistic predator. And then there was Shannon Gilbert. Though she wasn't one of the 4 Gilgo, her disappearance triggered the entire investigation. Her body was found a year later, in a swamp half a mile from where she was last seen alive. Officially, her death was ruled an accident. The medical examiner suggested she drowned while running through the marsh. But her family believes differently. Believes Shannon stumbled into the path of Lisk, that her desperate 911 call was not the cry of a confused woman, but the last voice of someone running for her life. Even FBI profilers admit Shannon's case doesn't fit neatly into an accident. Her presence in the middle of the Lisk dumping ground is more than coincidence. Years passed. Leads came and went. Suspects emerged. A disgraced police chief, local businessmen, neighbors in Oak Beach. Each had motives, opportunities, strange connections. But again and again, evidence fell short. For years, families of the victims accused Suffolk County Police of mishandling the investigation. Some even suggested a cover-up, pointing to corruption scandals in the department. The FBI was eventually brought in to assist, adding resources, profiling, and advanced forensic techniques. Still, no arrest, no face for the killer. But in 2022, new technology cracked the case open again. Investigators began re-examining phone records and DNA evidence with fresh methods. And then, in July 2023, an arrest shocked the country. Rex Heuermann, Manhattan architect, was charged with the murders of 3 of the Gilgo. His DNA, cell phone data, and digital searches tied him directly to the killings. The FBI raided his home in Massapequa Park, uncovering hundreds of disturbing internet searches, burner phones, and potential links to other victims. For the first time in over a decade, there was a name, a face, a man accused of being the Long Island serial killer. But even with his arrest, the mystery hasn't ended. Did Rex Heuermann act alone? Was he responsible for all 10 remains found along Ocean Parkway? Or only some? What about Shannon Gilbert? What about the unidentified toddler? The FBI continues to sift through years of evidence, searching for connections, while victims' families wait for closure. The Gilgo Beach murders are a grim reminder of how vulnerable society's most at-risk women can be and how long it can take to unmask a predator hiding in plain sight. For years, a killer stalked Long Island, using the shadows of Craigslist and the cover of suburban normalcy to hunt, and even now, with a man behind bars. The full truth of the Gilgo Beach murders may never be known. Beneath the sand and brush of Gilgo Beach lies more than bodies, lies a story of cruelty, of corruption, of fear. And though one man may stand trial, the question remains, was he the only one, or is the Long Island serial killer still out there? The desert keeps secrets well. Wind sweeps across the sand, burying footprints, swallowing time, and in the vast emptiness outside Albuquerque, New Mexico, the desert became the perfect graveyard for a predator. It was February 2, 2009, when a woman walking her dog on Albuquerque's West Mesa stumbled across something strange. Her dog began digging in the dirt, pulling up what looked like a bone. At first, she thought it was animal remains, But as she looked closer, she realized it was human. Police were called. Excavations began, and what they uncovered was a nightmare. Over the next weeks, the desert gave up its dead. One after another, the skeletons of women began to surface. By the time the digging was done, 11 women had been unearthed. 11 victims of what would become known as the West Mesa bone collector. The women ranged in age from their teens to their 30s. Most were sex workers, many struggling with addiction. Society had overlooked them, and their disappearances had barely made headlines at the time. Among the victims was a young mother, a teenager who had only recently vanished, and women whose families had long pleaded with police to take their cases seriously. And then, investigators found the remains of a fetus. One victim had been 4 months pregnant when she was killed. The FBI profilers knew immediately this was the work of a serial killer, a man who preyed on the vulnerable, a man who used the desert as his dumping ground. The burial site stretched across 92 acres of barren mesa land. The killer had carefully scattered the bodies, burying them shallowly under dirt and brush. It wasn't random, it was controlled, methodical. The FBI joined forces with Albuquerque police, launching one of the largest task force investigations in New Mexico's history. But for all the manpower, one problem loomed large: the desert doesn't give up secrets easily. Wind, erosion, and time had destroyed much of the evidence. DNA was degraded. Clothing was minimal. Cause of death for many victims couldn't even be determined. The killer had used the desert as an eraser. Over the years, several names have surfaced as possible suspects. One was Lorenzo Montoya, a man with a violent history of assaulting sex workers. He lived near the burial site. In December 2006, he was killed by the boyfriend of a woman he had strangled during an attack. Police have long suspected he may have been responsible for at least some of the West Mesa murders. But with his death, answers may have died with him. Other suspects included local pimps, traffickers, and even men connected to larger criminal organizations. But nothing concrete has ever been proven. The FBI has admitted they believe the killer was someone who knew the sex worker community well, someone who understood how easily vulnerable women could vanish without notice, someone who felt safe burying them in the desert because he knew no one would find them. The FBI has remained central in this investigation. Their profilers studied the burial patterns, the spacing of the graves, the victimology. One detail stood out: all the women had gone missing between 2001 and 2005. Then suddenly the killing stopped. Why did the killer die? Was he imprisoned for another crime? Did he move and begin killing elsewhere? The Bureau has looked at serial offenders nationwide, searching for patterns that match the West Mesa case. But so far, the trail remains cold. The saddest truth of the West Mesa bone collector is that for years, these women were forgotten. Their families reported them missing, begged for investigations. Many were told their loved ones were probably runaways, or addicts who had simply moved on. It wasn't until the desert gave up their bones that law enforcement finally connected the disappearances. To this day, families of the victims leave flowers and memorials near the site. They call it sacred ground, a place where justice still waits to be uncovered. The case remains open. The FBI continues to follow leads, but more than a decade later, no one has been charged. 11 women, one unborn child, buried in shallow graves while the city carried on just miles away. Somewhere out there, perhaps dead, perhaps still alive, is a killer who walked the desert at night with a shovel and a secret. The desert hides many things, but it does not bury evil forever. The bones of 11 women rose from the sand to tell their story, and until the FBI finds their killer, the West Mesa will whisper his name into the wind. It was the early hours of March 18, 1990. St. Patrick's Day had just passed. Boston was quiet, the city streets nearly empty. Inside the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, a historic mansion turned art gallery, priceless works of art hung in silent halls. But before sunrise, 2 men dressed as police officers approached the side entrance. They rang the buzzer. When the night security guard answered, the men spoke calmly, with authority. "Boston Police. We got a report of a disturbance. Let us in." The guard buzzed them inside. Within minutes, the men revealed the truth. They weren't police officers. They were thieves. And over the next 81 minutes, they carried out the largest art heist in world history, one that remains unsolved to this very day. The thieves handcuffed the guards, duct-taped their eyes and mouths, and locked them in the basement. Then, calmly, and methodically they began cutting priceless artworks from their frames. When they were done, they had taken 13 works of art, including masterpieces by Rembrandt, Vermeer, Degas, and Manet. The value of the stolen works, $500 million. Among them was the concert by Johannes Vermeer, one of only 36 known paintings by the Dutch master. Its value alone is incalculable. But the strangest part, the thieves left behind items of even greater worth. They seemed to know exactly what they wanted, or perhaps, exactly what they were told to take. The FBI immediately launched one of the most extensive art theft investigations in history. The museum was closed, crime scene tape wrapped around its historic halls. But the thieves had been careful. No fingerprints, no usable DNA. The security cameras minimal by 1990. Standards captured little. The empty frames were left hanging on the walls. A haunting reminder of what had been lost. For decades, theories have swirled. Some believed the theft was the work of the Boston mob. In the late 1980s and early 90s, criminal groups in the city were deeply involved in drugs, extortion, and violence. Rumors suggested the heist may have been carried out as leverage. Stolen art used as bargaining chips against prison sentences. The FBI investigated notorious mobster Whitey Bulger, suspecting he may have orchestrated the theft, but no proof ever surfaced. Others pointed to international crime syndicates. Some believed the works were smuggled overseas, traded in the shadows of the black market. There were even whispers of a conspiracy involving corrupt guards, inside information, and wealthy collectors who wanted stolen masterpieces locked away in private vaults. But for every lead, there was a dead end. The thieves ignored some of the museum's most valuable treasures. They left behind Michelangelo sketches. They left behind priceless manuscripts. Instead, they targeted a peculiar selection of works, including a small bronze eagle finial from a flagpole, and an ancient Chinese vase. Why these pieces? What did they mean to the thieves? The FBI has long speculated the theft was not about money alone. It may have been about power, or about a very specific buyer who requested very specific works. To this day, the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum keeps the empty frames on the walls, exactly where the paintings once hung. They are a statement both of loss and of hope. Museum has vowed, if the works are ever returned, the frames will be ready. But more than 30 years later, the frames remain empty. The FBI has chased leads across the world, from Ireland to Japan, from mob safehouses to international art dealers. Agents have followed whispers and shadows. In 2013, the Bureau announced publicly that they believed they had identified the men responsible, members of a New England crime syndicate, but both men were already dead, and the artwork still missing. The FBI believes the paintings may have changed hands multiple times, passed through criminal networks like currency. Some may still exist, hidden away in climate-controlled vaults. Others may have been destroyed, lost forever. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum heist is more than just a crime. It is a symbol, a reminder that even the greatest treasures can vanish in the night, swallowed by greed and ambition. For the FBI, it remains one of their most frustrating unsolved cases. For the families of art lovers, it is a wound that has never healed. And for the world, it is a mystery still waiting for resolution. 13 works of art, $500 million, a museum scarred forever, and a question that lingers like a shadow. Who walked through those doors disguised as police, and where is the art now? Decades pass, witnesses die, evidence fades, but the truth never disappears. The FBI still waits for answers, the families still wait for justice, and the shadows of these cases still linger, whispering from the past. Somewhere, someone knows the truth, and maybe, one day, these mysteries will finally be solved. Thank you for watching Breakdown. Cold cases the FBI needs solved. If this story gripped you, subscribe to the channel, share this video with your friends, and let us know in the comments which of these cases haunts you the most. Because next time, we'll return with another case, one even darker, one even more unbelievable. Until then, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, sometimes the walls we trust the most are the ones that fail us.